everybody. Welcome to Vikings Report Rewind. I'm Ted Glover, your humble host. Off to my left, I guess it is Christopher Gates, the founder, lead blogger, and numero uno honcho of the SB Nation Minnesota Vikings website, the Daily Norseman. You can find that over at dailynorseman.com. And there we go. Right below me, my co-host for Vikings Report with Drew and Ted. Since I'm Ted, he's got to be Drew. Drewster, how you doing?
Oh, doing great. Here to talk some football today. Finally got Christopher Gates in the house. I'm doing fantastic. How are you guys doing?
Good. Chris, how are you?
Good. I'm doing all right, man. It still sucks the season's over, but, there's still football. Well, there's one meaningful football game left between now and September. But, it happens. Like I said, every season with this team ends badly. So
yeah,
we get used to after
62 straight years. Why would we change that?
Welcome in, everybody. Come on into the chat. Let's talk.
Welcome, everybody. Look, we got a couple of quick announcements. First and most important, behind the scenes doing all of this, the David Copperfield of this show, Toonces. Everybody say hi to Toonces. She's in the comments with the chat.
Meow.
Don't forget to head over to Purple Pain Forum, sign up over there. Great message board for Vikings Talk. Head on over to our website, VikingsReport.com. We just couldn't sync up schedules this week. We took last week off. My wife and I took a quick mini vacation, had a good time. But we will be back in studio this coming week, next Saturday. The show will air, and our positional review returns. We're going to start out with quarterbacks. We're going to talk like we did last year. We're going to talk about guys on the roster, potential free agents, guys we can get in the draft. And, of course, it's going to be a big Kirk Cousins discussion because that's all we talk about during the offseason.
Yep, the draft coverage will start, Ted. We'll have 12 positions, 180 players spanning over now into the last position. Safeties will be covered the week of the NFL draft. So we'll be talking draft every week positionally like we did last year. We really enjoy it, and we hope you do too.
Now, it's probably transparent to you guys, but we are using a new streaming platform. We switched over to StreamYard. We were going to use the Chinese spy balloon to get coverage of the entire country, but we just shot it down. So we very last minute, we had to switch over to StreamYard. Ruby's been doing a great job. We practiced a couple times, but there might be a couple glitches. So if there are a couple glitches, just deal with it. You're Vikings fans. You've dealt with much worse in the past. So one last thing. Congratulations. I think he's in the chat right now. Congratulations to a friend of the show, Nick Howard. Him and his wife, Margot, just had a beautiful baby girl, baby Vivian, mom, dad, baby, and big brother are all doing well. I bet Nick's a little bit tired, though, so get some sleep when you can, buddy. You might want to, if you could take a nap now and just watch the show later. It's going to be on the YouTube site. All right.
Hey, Vivian.
And since Nick did ask in the comments here, I actually got this shirt for Christmas, so I'm not exactly sure where it was purchased, but this was a Christmas gift. So, yeah.
What a great time for Nick Howard.
Good deal. Yeah, Nick's here. We just got the comment. Nick's here. Yeah, give Nick a hearty congratulations. He deserves it. Congratulations on not getting any sleep for 18 more years. Well done. All right. Well, it's been a big week, big couple of weeks in Vikings land. In the NFL, the greatest, I would argue the greatest of all time. He's probably more well-known for his time at the University of Michigan, but NFL quarterback Tom Brady has retired.
Yeah.
There is an entire generation of NFL fans that don't know NFL life without Tom Brady. He's been in the league for, 20, 23, 24 years, whatever it is. Chris, I want to get your initial thoughts on Brady. The Vikings are one of only 3 teams that never beat Tom Brady in his NFL career. 0-6 like that.
And the other 2 teams were the 2 teams that he played for. So they
that really doesn't count.
And the Vikings never beat Peyton Manning either. So if you have one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time and you're playing the Vikings, you're in pretty good shape. But like you said, Brady's been to 10 Super Bowls, something like that. Imagine taking your team to 10 Super Bowls. Like in 23 years, literally every other year, this dude was in the Super Bowl.
Right.
I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, he's obviously got the stats now because he's been compiling for forever, but I think he's pretty well silenced the greatest quarterback of all time debate. Now it's just a bunch of dudes fighting for the second spot behind him. But what an incredible career. I mean, if he decides to call it quits this time, he might decide to come back again. Who knows? But it's just an amazing career the guy had. You gotta give credit where credit's due.
Yeah, I think he's done this time. Like last year when he retired, Drew, when you watched that press conference, it just seemed like he still had maybe some doubts or reservations. When I saw his video when he was on the beach, he seemed at peace with it. I don't know about you, Drew. What do you think? You think he's coming back? Or what are your thoughts on Tom Brady's career?
He's not coming back. But he doesn't need to come back.
No.
The greatest quarterback to ever play in the NFL. I mean, if you make a list, you don't have Brady first. I don't want to read the rest of the list. Hard work, coming from Michigan, hard worker there. Wasn't even the starter there, but he got to New England, got his chance, he got his opportunity and never gave it up.
Yeah.
Amazing the things he did. What was it? 7 Super Bowls, 5 Super Bowl MVPs, and I think 3 league MVPs. I mean,
something like that. Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy, but he'll go off into the sunset as the #1 quarterback ever until somebody breaks it. But I don't know if anybody will. He's just a great quarterback, great football player.
And his only kryptonite was Eli Manning in the Super Bowl. Of all people, Eli Manning. Purple and Gold for Dave says, and 4 other AFC championship game losses. 14 of 23 years.
Wow.
He was in a conference championship game. Those numbers are just stupid.
Next stop, Harbaugh gone, Brady in.
Yeah.
Head coach of Michigan.
So? You think so?
No, he's going to take the $400 million he's getting from talking on TV. That's what he's going to take.
I think he will too.
If he pushes Tony Romo out of the booth, that's $400 million well spent. Jesus.
I don't know, Jim. Not sure, Jimmy.
Sure. Let's see if he can put the ball.
And that's Tony Romo now. That's all. I mean, he was great at
that guy.
I don't know.
Remember how much everybody loved that guy when he first started doing work as an analyst, and then the last couple of years he's just gone right into the toilet, man. It's just
he's mainlining meth in commercial takes or something. I don't know what he's doing.
He's stretching out. Oh, Jim, can you get that foot down? Oh,
it's terrible. He's just terrible anymore. All righty, so that's it with Brady. So, look, we mentioned at the top of the show, the Super Bowl is tomorrow. Going to be the Eagles and Chiefs. What were you guys' thoughts? The divisional round, championship round of the NFL playoffs. Entertaining games. Anybody in there you didn't think should have been? What are you thinking? What were you thinking?
There's a lot that I'm thinking. It gets down to like the top 4 teams. I think two teams that made it are deserving. Because if you look at how if you picked 4 teams at the halfway point through the season, the Eagles and the Chiefs would certainly be 2 of them. The championship games, I think they went along as scheduled. I think we'll talk more about the Giants when we talk about the Vikings, of Giants versus Vikings and how they looked against the Eagles. That was a huge difference, and that should let you know where the Vikings are at, but we'll get to that. But I'm mainly coming away with the sorry-ass officiating. That was Bengals game. You know what?
Terrible.
We can send a spaceship 240 million miles to Mars and dump off a Land Rover that scoops up dirt and takes pictures and makes coffee, whatever the hell it does. But we can't figure out the officiating, Ted.
No, we can't. And and both NFC and AFC championship, the overriding theme for both championship games. And like I said, I may have said Super Bowl tomorrow. My Super Bowl is tomorrow, but everybody else's Super Bowl is next week. So next Sunday is the Super Bowl. The overriding theme of both conference championship games was how poorly NFL officiating is these days. And like Chris, I think it was Arian Foster that made the joke about having the script, and they were running, we would get our script every week on how the season, before the season, and then each week, and it was kind of a big joke, and everybody sort of ran with it on Twitter. And look, I don't think the NFL is rigged. I just don't. But I can understand why people think that way, because officiating is so bad, Chris.
It absolutely is. I mean, there's been the talk of going to full time officials. I mean, I don't even know what going to full time officials is going to do because that like Drew said, we have we can send people to the moon, send people to Mars, yet we're still measuring first downs with a freaking chain that breaks every other week or whatever the hell. I mean, it's just stupid. I mean, and the bad officiating started like the very first drive of the NFC Championship game with that catch from Devonta Smith that wasn't a catch on the fourth down that set up the first touchdown. And how many times during the Vikings Giants game a couple weeks before that did we see? Oh, they've done an expedited review of this play, and nobody had to challenge, nobody had to review. They just looked at the play and saw that the officials had screwed up, and they stopped. Where was that on that? Where was their expedited review there? Like, when do they use it? When do they not use it? I mean, I don't know. And the AFC game really wasn't any better. It's just I don't know what the fix is for the officiating at this point. I mean, obviously, nobody really thinks the NFL is rigged. At least most rational folks I don't think believe the NFL is rigged. But the officiating, something needs to improve because it's bad and it's getting worse, and it seems like nobody is ever held accountable for it. And that last part is the worst part of the whole thing, is that like, oh, maybe they don't get assigned to this or this or this, but nobody gets held accountable really for any of this stuff, so nothing's going to change.
Why can't the officials have a press conference after the game like everybody else has to?
That's a good question. I think if like in the AFC Championship game, there was that sequence. It didn't end up affecting the outcome of the game, but Kansas City got 5 downs. Basically, it's like in the third quarter. And they were just a bunch of questionable penalties and all that other stuff. And I don't know why they don't. And Chris, you mentioned, and Drew, you comment on this, but you're not sure full-time guys would help. I think it would. You make them go full-time, study film Monday through Friday, have mock games with maybe former NFL players or free agents or whatever, like, and they don't have to go full padded. They could do whatever, but they can focus on calls and positioning and all that. But I just, something has to be done because it's really affecting the quality of the product the NFL puts out.
Yes, and it's turning off a lot of fans. Let me ask you real quick concerning that catch Chris was talking about, Devonta Smith. How much is on the officials and how much is on the opposing coach of the Niners to call a replay, throw the flag on that? Because that's generally what it came down to, is if he threw the red flag. You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to make an excuse for the officials, but it was hard to tell live action if that was. I didn't see it till they came back in commercial and played it slow that he fumbled it at the end of the catch. So
no, and honestly, I think Shanahan probably should have thrown the flag or something. But like I said, that goes back to how many times during the Vikings Giants game or some of these other games did we see the quote unquote expedited review, where they take a look at what's happening. It's the NFC Championship game. You've got cameras everywhere. You have every conceivable angle right there in front of you. And if you're gonna have the expedited review, do the expedited review. You shouldn't have to. I mean, Shanahan still could have thrown the flag and probably should have, especially at that point in the game. But if you're gonna have this expedited review that benefits teams and keeps it from having to burn challenges all the time, use the damn thing.
How come Ted, Chris, how come nobody asked Goodell at these press conferences he has, like the league meetings and opening up the new league year? Goodell comes on there and blows smoke up our ass. How come nobody asked him about your officiating's terrible? Yeah, but you make $30 billion a year. Why can't you have? Nobody ever asks him. Why can't the officiating be better? It's the worst in sports.
Yeah, I don't know. I wish somebody
nobody asked him.
But the thing is, as long as people watch the game and pay for Sunday ticket and go to the games and whatever, and I'm gonna sit here and bitch about the officiating. I'm not gonna watch the games because of it. I mean, until something like that happens, they're not gonna do anything because they don't have to. I mean, they're making so much money they could print it, and all they'll do is just like wait for the complaining to subside. I mean, like, look, within 2 or 3 days of both conference championship games, everybody pretty much quit complaining about officiating.
Yeah, we'll figure that out. I'll have our friend Courtney Cronin ask him at the next press conference.
Vikings Uncensored says as quick as Smith got up and was motioning everyone to get to the line, it's a failure by Shanahan to not challenge it. I mean,
Great point.
like,
Great point.
I'll agree and disagree. I mean, one thing that really irritated me about that whole sequence, about that play, was they didn't show there was a clear angle of where Smith dropped the ball, where the ball hit the ground, and they didn't show that until after they had come back from commercial. I don't think.
Right. They didn't.
I mean, I don't know why they didn't, but that just feels like a failure on the part of the replay crews and the replay official. But that's just me.
No, you're absolutely right.
No, I absolutely agree.
Live, you couldn't. Live, it looked like a catch.
Yeah, it did. Okay.
All right.
Let's look at the teams, the final four teams in the NFC Championship and the AFC Championship. Eagles and the 49ers and the Chiefs and the Bengals. And Drew, you mentioned the Giants when they played the Vikings in the wild card round compared to when they played the Eagles in the divisional round. Let's compare all those defenses to the Vikings this past season. I mean, and it was like when the Giants played the Eagles, it was just painfully obvious to me how bad the Vikings defense actually was. Chris, what do the Vikings need to do to get their defense at least in the direction of where Philadelphia and the Chiefs and the 49ers and the Bengals are?
They need to at least hit on, the occasional draft pick on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, we talked about on social media a while back, this team hasn't drafted and developed a defensive starter or a defensive contributor worth anything since they drafted Eric Kendricks and Danielle Hunter and Trey Waynes back in 2015. Wow. If you look at the defensive players they've drafted from 2016 onward, most of them aren't even on the team, and the only ones that are even contributing are like Cam Bynum, who's like a marginal starter at safety. But the defensive draft picks this team has made over the last 6 or 7 years have just been awful. And we have some guys that they're kind of coasting on reputation and have been for the last couple of years. And it's going to come time to basically deconstruct it down to the studs and freaking just rebuild everything at this point around a couple of guys. I mean, you probably want to keep Danielle Hunter around, but if you were to do an over under, like 2.5 starters from this year's defense starting on next year's defense, you probably got to play the under, because there's not going to be anybody from this defense, probably with the exception of Danielle Hunter and Harrison Phillips, starting for this defense again next year. I mean, there's just going to be, I don't know if Patrick Peterson's coming back. I don't know if Eric Kendricks is going to be here, or Harrison Smith or Jordan Hicks or any of these guys. But they need to, if they're going to embrace a certain scheme, they need to build towards that scheme. And they just need to get better and faster and more talented on the defensive side of the football overall.
Drew, what are you thinking? What do the Vikings need to do to get better? Just get better. Come on.
Average.
Chris Gates hit the nail right on the head about the draft and developing players, and hasn't been enough stardom on that side defensively in the draft for the last 6 or 7 years. There isn't. There's a lot of misses in there, guys. And when you start missing, you're like sissing. You want to know the difference? I watched the Vikings and the Giants play 2 games. That was pretty much head-to-head. That was pretty even all the way across the board, both those games. Close the whole way. Everybody's making plays on both sides of the ball. Then you watch the Giants play the Eagles, and they got their tits licked.
Yeah.
They shouldn't even have been on the same field. It was quite a contrast between Giants playing the Vikings and the Eagles. You know what the difference is? The Eagles had 70 sacks, 2 off the record, 70 quarterback sacks, and the number 1 pass defense. That's all you got to look. When you have those 2 things, that's how you build a football team. A quarterback, a pass defense, and a pass rush. It's not rocket science. They covered all 3 of those this year, and look at how well they did. And I think the Vikings are off from that, Ted. They don't have enough. I mean, it's a fine line of playing the free agent game and using your draft picks. You want to use your draft picks to develop the foundation of the team, but if you look at the Eagles, that Hassan Reddick free agent signing, huge.
Yeah.
Huge. And when they got Gardner Johnson away from the Saints, just a couple guys, just two right there. You get two guys that make a huge difference on your team. You kind of blueprint what they're doing. They stacked a bunch of picks when they got rid of Wentz, right? I mean, they have rebuilt a team that's going to be good for a few years.
The Eagles went to the Super Bowl in 2017. Since then, they fired a coach. They basically gutted the roster. They rebuilt the roster, and now they're going again.
Yep.
It's
right.
ridiculous.
Yep. They sure did.
You got to take your hat off to him, even though I don't really care for the Eagles that much. Their plan with Howie Roseman as GM, his plan for head coach, they got a great head coach. That guy is all business all the time, and he doesn't fear anybody. They got a good quarterback who's young, a lot of years left in that guy, and they're still going to build on that next year. The Vikings need to take the similar thing. I mean, blow it up, get it going. But they don't have the draft capital like the Eagles did. The Eagles made this ascension, or whatever the word is that Chris just said, from 17 to now by developing draft picks, not getting a second round guy that you cut.
Yeah. And I think Rhino mentioned it, and Purple and Gold for Days podcast kind of piggybacked off it, but that's when you have a GM that would rather have 12 seventh round picks and 2 first rounders, and then an owner who would just want to keep guys around longer past when they should. And those play into it as well. I mean, when you miss on guys in the draft consistently, then you're forced to either keep players longer than you should. And that's kind of the case with Harrison Smith, Eric Kendricks. They got rid of Anthony Barr miraculously, but whatever. And then you've got nobody coming in to replace him. Now, I think Brian Asamoah can be that guy to kind of come in and replace Eric Kendricks. This is a good comment from Lauren. The Eagles developed picks and didn't hold on to players beyond their trade value like we do. And that's another great point, because I don't think you're going to get, if you do decide to get rid of guys that are old with big contracts, like Harrison Smith, like Eric Kendricks, like Adam Thielen on the other side of the ball, there's not much trade value there because A, they have a big contract, and B, they have noticeably slowed. I mean, if guys like us can see that just watching old highlights, imagine what coaches see on game film.
What do you mean, guys like us, Ted? What exactly are you saying?
We're schlubs. I mean, come on. I thought the Super Bowl was tomorrow for a while. Yeah, I mean, what do you want from me?
We are schlubs, aren't we? I will really say this. We kick it back to Chris. I will say this. For being a schlub, I know this. You're not going to fix your roster until you fix your GM and your coaching staff. And at least the Vikings have taken that first step in fixing, because you can't fix the roster if there's a bunch of crap going on between your GM and your head coach, and the gloom, and the doom, and the BS. They've taken a step that way.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which the Eagles did when they got Sirianni, whatever his name is.
Yep.
At least they got that portion covered, Chris. Now they just need to go further from there.
No, and I think this is something that we've mentioned before, but when Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell took over their jobs last year, they were still basically working with the Rick Spielman, Mike Zimmer scouting staff and that sort of thing. And then after the draft was over, they dismissed a bunch of those people and brought in their guys. So this is going to be the first real draft that Kwesi has, where everyone's kind of on the same page. Everyone's looking at the same, scouting foundation and whatnot. So I'm curious to see. I mean, like Ted's already said, I think we trade out of the first round because they just need to compile picks at this point, because they've only got 4 and maybe 5, depending on what the compensatory picks look like. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Kwesi handles this draft now that he's got his people in place, rather than having to use what was here from the last regime.
And Ted, before I kick it back to you, the Ed Donatel being gone, the defensive coordinator thing is huge. Yeah. They got to hit it. They got to get it right. They missed that last year, so I understand why it's taking time.
And we're gonna hit on the defensive coordinator job search in a minute, folks. I just want to remind you, if you're new to the show, first of all, thanks for joining in. We got just over 200 people in the chat room. If you want to win a prize, make a comment in the chat. So what Ruby's going to do is she's writing the list of the names down. We've got this great electronic Wheel of Toonce's Destiny, as we like to call it. And at the end of the show, we're going to spin, and you're going to be able to choose one of the prizes from our Vikings Report prize vault. You can go to VikingsReport.com. You can get a link to the prize vault there and see what the prizes are now in anticipation of you maybe winning. Unfortunately, we have not been able to recover the Chinese spy balloon yet, so that is not an eligible prize as of right now. We are negotiating with the NSA to see if we can maybe get that here in a week or two. But there we go. All right, Drew, what were you going to say?
I forgot. It was 10 minutes ago.
All right, well, look, real quick.
No. We are. Tootses and I were discussing yesterday. We're going to revamp the whole prize vault in the off season, so we'll still have the prize vault. We're going to redo it and make it look cool. But we got a lot of additions coming in.
Okay.
A lot of additions coming in.
And one other thing about the upcoming offseason, Chris, you mentioned not having any draft picks or not having his scouting team, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah not having a scouting team. He also sort of was given a mandate by Ziggy Wilf, and I think that's the reason he was hired as GM over Ryan Poles, who is absolutely tearing down the Bears roster and rebuilding it. I mean, he was given a mandate to look, you compete with the roster you have because we think we're good and we think we can compete. He did that, and it got them a one and done in the playoffs. So I think he now may have added incentive or ammunition or a better ground to stand on, whatever it is you want to use, whatever phrase, to go back to Wilf and say, look, we did this as you asked, and we did okay, but now we've got to go and we've got to rebuild and we've got to get rid of some of these contracts. And look, these contracts that he's dealing with aren't his fault, but he has to deal with them. Right. So I would think that they have this year they're going to start, and next year they can go really lean into it, and it'll kind of depend on how they view the offense and Kirk and whether or not they want to trade other guys that you might not think they should trade. And we'll get all into that in the weeks ahead, though. And Drew, you mentioned a minute ago the defensive coordinator. They got to nail that. Our last studio show, I didn't think they were going to fire Ed Donatel, and you were right. They most certainly did. So far to date, the Minnesota Vikings have interviewed Brian Flores, Mike Pettin, Sean Desai, and Ryan Nielsen, and they want to interview Broncos defensive coordinator Ajero Ivero. I hope I pronounced that name right. If I mispronounced it, it wasn't intentional. Now, since they first started this interview process, Desai has removed his name from consideration. He's interviewing for the Broncos job, and he's focusing on that gig. Ryan Nielsen was hired by somebody. I can't remember who it was. Atlanta. That's right.
Chris. Yeah.
So that leaves us Brian Flores, Mike Pettin, and potentially Ajero if Butt Lips Sean Payton, the new Broncos coach, will let him interview with other teams.
He is.
Now, let me say something about that. Other than the overarching storyline of Sean Payton being a dick, because he is. But, so you've got Avero who's under contract, and the Broncos can keep him from They kept him from interviewing with the Falcons when the Falcons wanted him to come do their job. So on the one hand, they can prevent Avero from interviewing with other teams, but on the other hand, they brought in Sean Desai and Brian Flores to interview for his job. So you might be unemployed in a couple of days, but don't go setting up any interviews with anybody because we don't know if we want to. It's so stupid. I can't even. Man.
I love me some Chris Gates.
I feel bad for the guy because, he could be out of a job here in a couple of days and I can't line up nothing else because my boss won't let me. I don't get it.
Well, bring him in because that guy is my choice for defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
I will give you my reasoning as to why Peyton hasn't let Avero interview anywhere else. He's a new coach coming in. He's got current guys that are under contract. And I think he wants to make sure that they will be the best fit. I can understand why he is interviewing other guys. Look, all three of these, Avero and Flores and Desai are all really impressive guys. And I just think Peyton wants to pick the guy that he's most comfortable with. Because, look, other than head coach, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator are two most important coaching positions on the staff. So he's got to be able to have a good working relationship with both of those guys. And so I can understand why he's saying, look, just hang on. Let's just wait a little bit because those opportunities will be out there. Drew, what do you think? You think Peyton's just being a turd about this or what?
He's always a turd, Frankie Muniz. Can't stand Peyton. He's just I don't know. I don't know why Avero should just leave. I mean, he probably Peyton probably already has his defensive coordinator in mind. I don't know why he does everything the way he does, but my first question to the Vikings is what to both you guys about the Vikings defensive coordinator searches. Ted, why do they only interview like 4 or 5 guys? Wouldn't you interview like 10, 12 people?
I think there's a certain personality or type of guy that the Vikings want, and you're not going to go with an unknown dude. You probably don't want to go with a guy coming out of college.
Which was one of my choices.
Yeah, that sort of narrows the talent pool down, and of that, now you've got guys that are under contract and they can't interview. Like Avero, for example. So I just think they sort of had, and I think the Vikings interviewed Desai last year, so that's probably a return interview.
Yeah.
I just think he's looking for a guy that's going to fit the culture and that they're trying to establish in Minnesota. That's my theory, Chris.
No, and that makes sense. I mean, yeah, they did interview Desai last year as part of the process, and maybe there are other people they want to interview, but they're kind of waiting to see. They obviously have their hierarchy of who they prefer and who they would like to see come in here, but guys like Flores and Avero are candidates for head coaching jobs, so you got to see what shakes out with those jobs first, and then once they get their head coaching jobs, or if they get their head coaching jobs, and you can potentially move on to some other guys. But yeah, it's moving slower than a lot of people would like, but I think the Vikings really have their hearts and minds set on somebody, whoever the case may be, and they're just kind of waiting to see how everything shakes out.
I believe that O'Connell and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, they hired Donatel just by saying experience. We need an experienced guy because our head coach is an offensive guy. He's a first-year head coach. Let's just get somebody super experienced in here for the defense. And they didn't really look any further than doing their due diligence on what happened with Donatel. I think they wanted the experience to make him feel like, all right, it's in his hands. That didn't work. I think they learned that this year to say we got to be more hands-on with the DC because the defensive coordinator was a failure.
So, yeah, I think so. I think so too. But
I think they just chose him last year. They didn't really look in depth, and I think they learned their lesson, and they're doing that this year. So
let's narrow this down then to Flores, Pettine, and Avero. Drew, which guy do you want?
First off, limit it down to 2, Flores and Avero. Pettine's Donatel with a pecker. Look, Pettine's
now the show's underway. Now the show started.
So throw Pettine out of the mix. Good with the other 2 guys, Ted. Avero, I've been watching that dude over the course of his time in Denver, and this is our opportunity to really build a defense from a guy who really, really knows defense. I'm going to throw this out there to you guys. He was defensive coordinator of the Broncos, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, still is.
What team punted the most in the NFL last year?
I think the Broncos did.
I would guess
Broncos
the Broncos
did. 96 punts. And his defense was still what? 8th in the league.
They were saddled with the lowest scoring offense in the National Football League last year.
That has to be a factor when you're looking at guys like to take over. That's a huge thing for me. His defense had to be out there because they punted so much with a sorry-ass Russ Wilson offense. Their defense was still top 10. I think that's amazing to me. And he knows the player. He knows the concept. He knows he's got enough experience where you want to build a defense with a young guy that's going to be diagnosing plays and scheming. He's a really good defensive mind. Not that Flores isn't. Flores, both those guys are quite capable of turning this defense around, Ted. But I would like Avero. He's my choice because what he did in Denver. Imagine if he gets really good players.
Okay. So. Chris, who's your guy?
I think I kind of lean toward Avero at this point too. I mean, Flores would be nice because if you look at some of the blitz percentage stats that some of the folks have put out over social media, if you thought the Vikings weren't aggressive enough last year, it would be a complete 180-degree flip if Brian Flores was this team's defensive coordinator because I believe they said he had the highest blitz percentage in the league over the last couple of years when he was defensive coordinator and or a head coach somewhere. But you know, like Drew said with the Vero, I mean, I don't pay a lot of attention to the Broncos most of the time, but I mean, they had a really great defense, and outside of Patrick Surtain and the safety Simmons, I think his name is, he did a whole lot with not very much.
Yes.
As far as I can see. And if this defense is going to get torn all the way down to the foundation and rebuilt, that's the kind of guy you want because you're not going to have a bunch of superstars on defense. You're going to have a bunch of guys that you're going to have to develop and bring up through the ranks and whatnot. And Rivero has shown that he can do that because, like I said, I don't know a lot of the guys on that Denver defense, but they were still a really solid team, despite that. And they dealt away Von Miller, and they were still a really good defense. So that's the kind of guy this team needs if you're going to go through a full rebuild on that side of the ball. So he's my choice, I think.
And there's precedent for having a really substantial turnaround in your first year. And I take you back to after Leslie Frazier got fired in 2013 to when Mike Zimmer got hired. At the end of 2013, the Vikings had almost identical defensive numbers that they do now. They were 32nd in points and 31st in yards, or flip those numbers. They were terrible. Mike Zimmer came in, and in 2014, the only two guys that started on the 2013 defense were Chad Greenway and Brian Robeson. And the Vikings went from 32nd to 14th. So there's the potential there if you get the right defensive coach. And Mike Zimmer was the perfect coach for the Vikings when he got hired. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. He turned that defense around. And if Avero can do that and the Vikings offense can stay mostly intact and produce the way they did this past season, this team is going to be better than they were this past year, if they can. Mm-hmm. Brian Flores is like the most between Flores, Pettin, and Avero. Flores is pretty not as experienced as Pettin, but he's got a lot more postseason experience. He was he broke in with the Patriots staff, and he was the defensive play caller for the Pats in 2018. They never really called him the defensive coordinator because Bill Belichick or whatever that beat the Rams that year. Part of 4 Super Bowl teams with the Pats. Dolphins head coach from 2019 to 2021, went 24 and 25, and he's got that discrimination lawsuit he filed with the NFL after he got let go in Miami, alleging discrimination in hiring practices with the Giants, and that the Miami Dolphins owner wanted him to tank for better draft picks. We talk about culture, and I think Nick Howard mentioned it earlier that if you want a culture fit, Flores ain't it. When he was fired, there were a lot of players that spoke out for him, but there was a lot of rumors about him having a lot of friction between the quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. Would you like, Drew? Would you like Flores to be your defensive coordinator if the Vikings go that direction?
Well, if Avero isn't the choice, then Flores is going to probably get the job. It's amazing that how come he hasn't taken that Cardinals head coaching job?
I don't think the Cardinals will pick anybody. And I don't look. Kyler Murray is such a pain in the ass. Would you want to be his coach?
No,
Chris.
No, but the flopping around between the Colts and the Cardinals and the Vikings. This guy's waiting on this guy. This guy's waiting on this guy. This guy's dating this guy. It's like it's crazy. Nothing's really getting resolved. I don't know. I'm up in the air with Flores of the things you just mentioned. I know he's a great defensive mind, and he's aggressive because of the blitzing that we mentioned here. I don't want any gloom coming in. And I'm not to say, I don't know if that would happen within the roster, but I think Avero's a guy that can mold his own defense, and Flores is a little bit more standoffish.
Yeah, I think so too.
To change, I mean, he's going to want to do it his way.
Chris, what are your thoughts on Flores? Would you be okay with him as defensive coordinator?
I mean, I think I would be. I mean, like Drew said, Avero is the first choice, but Flores is the only other guy they've interviewed that's still well. I think we're not counting Mike Pettin at this point because
what's your guys' thoughts on Pettin?
If they wanted to hire Mike Pettin to be the defensive coordinator, they'd have hired him by now. So I think he's kind of the last resort kind of choice.
Did either of you want that guy, Pettin?
No.
No.
Okay.
No.
Look, he had some good defenses early on. He was, I think, with the Jets. He's DC defensive coordinator for the Jets from 2009 to 2012. The Bills in 2013. Had that stint as the Browns head coach in 14 and 15. Most people know him, his body of work as the Packers defensive coordinator from 2018 to 2020. And those defenses just didn't look very impressive to me. Okay. The Cardinals' the Cardinals have to pick a coach. And then I think once the Cardinals pick a coach, that will sort of break this logjam and we can figure out what the Vikings are going to do or who the Vikings are going to be able to hire. The only thing that stinks, I mean, I saw a thing where Nick Howard, he said he lives in Arizona, that the Cardinals aren't going to hire Flores. If the Cardinals hire Avero, I would think that would mean Desai goes to Denver as the defensive coordinator, and that would pretty much leave Flores the defensive coordinator for the Vikings. That's what it would seem to me. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of worried that Mike Pettin might get the job just because, other jobs, guys, Avero and Flores might take other jobs. And then, they, like you said, Drew, they haven't really interviewed anybody else. I think the Vikings thought they had a pretty good line on one of those guys they originally interviewed, and now it's done. So they may be stuck with Pettin. I don't know.
Is not a step forward. Pettin is not a step forward. It's a mistake if you're going to go through another struggling season next year because you got a guy who won't do anything. He's going to do more of Donatel than
I think so too.
We need a younger, innovative guy full of energy, like DeMeco Ryans did with the Niners. That's what you need.
Yeah.
Pettin's been down that road. We took a down that road guy last year, and he was terrible. Why do it again? I would be against that.
I would too, Chris.
And I don't know if the Vikings are going to interview him at some point, but if something happens where neither Avero or Flores winds up being the DC for this team, they need to get on the phone with Steve Wilks and get that guy potentially in here because, I mean, he was the head coach, or he took over as the interim coach in Carolina last year, and that Carolina team was bad.
Yeah,
they were a bad football team, and then they traded away their best player, which you would have thought would have made them even worse. But and granted, it was the NFC South, but they were still in postseason contention all the way to week 17. But yeah, I don't know how many interviews he's gotten. I think the Niners may have interviewed Wilks, but if something happens where Avero and Flores either wind up taking head coaching jobs or Peyton keeps Avero in Denver or whatever, I think Steve Wilks needs to get a phone call from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Jason Miller commented, maybe Jeff Saturday would like to be our DC if he doesn't work out in Indy. That's another clown show organization right now. The Colts are going to interview 20 guys 3 times, and they're going to end up rehiring Jeff Saturday. That's what's going to happen in Indy. I can tell you that right now.
You know what, guys? Just as good as the Eagles have turned it around the last 3 seasons, the Colts have gone the other direction.
Yeah.
3 years ago, they seemed like they were on the porch of going to a Super Bowl, and now they're just a soup sandwich.
Yeah, they are.
Mm-hmm.
Football is a wicked, wicked mistress. We all know that.
Yeah, Steve Wilks is a good suggestion. I don't know.
If they had Wilks at the beginning of the season, Carolina's probably in the playoffs.
Probably, yeah.
Playoffs.
Yep. I'm getting this sinking feeling that when the smoke clears, it's going to be Mike Pettin. I hope I'm wrong. I was wrong about Ed Donatel getting fired. I hope I'm wrong about this, but it just I I think hopefully we'll get more clarity this week. I think the Cardinals are going to hire a guy. If Avero's not the guy in Denver, then it'll be Denver's move. Apparently, there's Desai was in New Orleans with Peyton. I would think Desai's probably got an inside track for that job, which would mean Avero would be free to get hired by the Vikings.
So
I hope I'm wrong about Pettin. Purple Skull Podcast. No, Ted. Yeah, Jason Miller. No, Ted. I hope I'm wrong. I want to be wrong.
Flores is going for the head coaching position at Arizona, and he's also available for the defensive coordinator job in Denver.
What's that?
Mm-hmm.
Brian Flores. He could be the defensive coordinator in Denver or the head coach of Arizona. I mean,
they want it. Yeah, the Broncos want to interview Flores as well.
So are we like the third pick on that list?
I don't know what his personal preference list is. I would imagine if I'm Flores, I'd want a head coaching gig, but then I'd have to be the head coach for Kyler Murray.
You know that.
So I'd have to get a Call of Duty account to be able to talk to him after practice.
Is there a bigger chance here career buster than being the head coach of the Cardinals? I mean, come on. You sign up for that's like getting on the guillotine, man. I mean, you don't win there. Nobody ever does.
Lauren T says, I think this run it back mentality is not attractive to a young, innovative DC. I agree. I don't think the Vikings are going to run it back on defense. I mean, they can't afford to. I mean, if they were to run the cap numbers, the contracts, the way they're set up right now, they're like $25 million over the cap. Even with the increase in the cap number to 224, they'd still be over. So they've got to get rid of some of these older guys, and I think they will.
You gotta.
So I would think the opposite, that with a defense is going to get kind of stripped down to the foundation, would be something a young DC defensive coordinator would want to cut his teeth on to kind of make a name for himself. He's thinking, because every coach thinks, look, I can turn any situation around. You have to have some kind of ego like that to be able to be a coach, whether it's the position coordinator or the coordinator or a head coach in the NFL, to think, well, I can make that player better. I can make this team better, whatever, or they wouldn't be a coach. So I would think it would actually be enticing, but that's just me.
No, you're exactly right. And I mentioned DeMeco Ryans earlier. I heard him in an interview a couple weeks ago, and the first 20 minutes he talked about tackling. Yeah. Remember I told you that's kind of amazing because he's talking about fundamentals instead of talking about himself.
Yeah.
But if you go back to when he was at Houston, when he was drafted by the Texans as a linebacker, to a man, everybody said in that team, who's the best coach in this team? And they said DeMeco Ryans.
Yeah.
Well, he was a player. So some things are just rolled in. Those guys are meant to coach. And besides, Chris mentioned Wilkes, which I think is a really, really good idea. I'm off the board, and I know people don't agree with me, but Phil Parker from the University of Iowa is a damn good defensive coordinator. Outside the box, very aggressive, gets the most out of his players, actually puts players in position to make plays. I know it's college. College guys come to the NFL and fail. I know it. I know that happened, but I like the guy.
And if you want to talk about a dude that's been saddled with some bad offense, it doesn't get any worse than the University of Iowa.
Right? I mean, they averaged 5.5 points a game. 5.5.
Punting is winning. Big Ten football.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love Phil Parker's scheme and how he identifies with the game and his experience. And I know they're not going to go that route, but man, that would really be exciting.
And Parker's not leaving Ferentz. I mean, they've been together. Parker, Ferentz, and I think Ferentz's kid runs the offense.
He's been there 11 years. He's not
I don't think he's going anywhere.
Fantastic defensive mind, though.
But going back to this young, hungry defensive coordinator, if they tell him, look, you're going to have a lot of say in this draft and on guys we get. Man, I hope, I think our buddy Rhino on the VU account mentioned the lack of team speed. The Vikings have got to get faster at the linebacker position. I think Asamoah is a good start. They've got to get faster laterally. They've got to get better in the defensive secondary, and I hope Booth and Lewisine come back and are healthy and can contribute next year. That would be a big start to the rebuild. We talked about defensive picks not working out. So I would think that with those pieces, I would argue that Asamoah, probably Hunter for a couple years, Sean and Booth are your new, and probably Caleb Evans, arguably, are your new core guys that you can build around. And that, look, there's a lot of work to do, but those guys are, I would think, would be enticing guys to say, yeah, I can get somewhere with these guys.
I mean, and the Vikings had a lot of these young guys on defense. I mean, you mentioned Sean, who had the injury, obviously, and Booth with his injury issues. Asamoah started getting worked into the defense toward the end of the year. Evans was starting for quite a bit this season until he got the concussion issues. Cezio Mayo kind of got worked into things at the end of the season, and those are guys, like you said, that they're essentially getting these guys back that didn't get a lot of snaps, didn't get a lot of run this past season. They started getting worked in toward the end of the year, but that little bit of experience is going to help them going forward. And they're young, talented guys. So, it could be enticing for someone, if you're looking to rebuild. You already have some of the pieces there. You just got to put the pieces in the right place.
Drew,
I have a question for you two.
Yeah.
First off, I wish Rick Spielman was back next year so we can go get Andrew Zendejo back.
Jesus. We've got enough injury issues. We don't need a guy that injures his own teammates at this point.
What I wanted to ask was, how the Eagles did very well with the free agent. They didn't go free agent crazy, but the guys they got were really big on why they're making it to the Super Bowl. Hassan Reddick and, thinking along the same lines for the Vikings, without going crazy on free agency, what are a couple positions that you would go get a free agent for in terms of that against the draft? Does that make any sense? Is there a couple positions that you see would be better filled with free agency and experience than a rookie? Or do you not think they need any free agents? Or, give me you guys' outlook on free agent signings.
Are you talking defensive side of the ball?
Either way, anywhere.
If they decide not to go back to Garrett Bradbury, I think Ethan Pocic, the center, would be a guy they might want to target on defense. Maybe corner, maybe linebacker. I think your defensive line guys are. I think they need to get a true nose tackle in the draft. If they're going to stay with the 3-4, I would, like Nick Howard mentioned, a backup quarterback. Yeah, they're going to need one of those. But I think linebacker and corner or maybe safety would be probably their best options in free agency. But that's just me.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think the cornerbacks, the linebackers, I think if you could get a guy like Jermaine Pratt from Cincinnati, I think his contract is up this year. He seems the kind of guy that you would want in the middle of this 3-4 sort of defense if that's the way they're going to continue going. You mentioned nose tackle. I think the nose tackle is already on the roster because I think Kyrie's Tonga is going to have a big year next season. I know Drew loves that guy, and he came on really late in the season, but with Dalvin Tomlinson leaving, I think Tonga is going to play a big role in this defensive line next year. He seems like the nose tackle type. I mean, Drew probably can speak more to that than I can, but I think he's the kind of guy that he's another one of those guys that this team can build around. I know because he went to BYU. He was a little bit older when he came out in the draft, but I think he's a guy that this team can build around too. But yeah, corners and linebackers are where I think they need to take a look at in free agency this year.
What about you, Drew? Since you asked the question.
Right along there with Chris on cornerback and linebacker. Not so much the linebacker. I think they can draft somebody would pick up some speed. The Vikings need a corner. If there's any position the Vikings have failed at the last 4 years is drafting corners. I still think they need to draft one, but I would seriously consider free agency for a good corner because they got to have at least one of those positions. One of those corner spots have to be a shutdown guy. I don't know if that makes any sense about going there instead of getting a rookie, but I don't think Patrick Peterson's coming back.
Okay.
I would say corner would be my number one free agent that I would go after.
All right. That makes sense. One last thing we'll do before we spin the wheel. We got Super Bowl predictions coming up. We got Super Bowl next Sunday. Not tomorrow, but next Sunday. Like I said earlier, next Sunday. You guys doing anything? You having a big Super Bowl party or going to a Super Bowl party or just staying at home and watching the game?
No, I'm probably just gonna stay at home and watch the game. People are terrible, so I try to avoid them as much as possible. so yeah, yeah. Tell me I'm wrong. You can't tell me I'm wrong.
I'm not. You're right. You're 100% right. People are terrible.
But yeah, I'm probably just gonna hang out, watch the game, and that's my plan. Maybe do something really exotic, like order a pizza or something. But outside of that, no, I'm just gonna sit and watch the game. I think.
Drew,
I can't outdo that. People are terrible. No, me and Toots is just stay home and watch the Super Bowl. And you know what? I've watched every Super Bowl since 1970, and I hear people say, "I'm not going to watch the Super Bowl." I mean, come on.
Yeah, I'm going to watch.
You are.
That's what I feel like telling everybody. I'm not going to watch the stupid Eagles in the Super Bowl. Well, then you're a dumbass because I like football. And I've never missed a Super Bowl, and I'm not going to miss this one. But nothing elaborate, Ted. Maybe like Chris said, order a pizza or,
so my oldest daughter and her family will be over, so I'll probably watch the game with two of my 3 grandsons. Youngest one, Josh, is kind of really starting to get into football. So
good.
This is pretty cool. So he was, I hate to say it, he was rooting for the Eagles. So they're in the Super Bowl. So he's probably going to give me a hard time. But
there's still time to cut him out of the will. That's okay.
All right, before we spin the wheel, I got one question. It was posed by Purple and Gold for Days on his channel. He said, would you offer your third for Mike Evans, the Tampa Bay wide receiver? Tampa Bay is going to clean house. Vikings need a good wide receiver too. Your thoughts? My thoughts are no. The Vikings don't have a second-round pick. That was part of the T.J. Hockenson trade. So if they trade their third-round pick, assuming it's this year or even next year, if it's this year, you don't pick. You pick first round, and they don't pick till the fourth round, pre-trades and all that. For Evans, who I think is past his prime, no, I would not. Drew?
I wouldn't, simply because of the fact that, Mike Evans is a tremendous football player, great receiver. But if you look at the NFL draft, it has evolved into wide receivers. There's about 37, 38 guys that get taken every year on average over the last 5 years. And the drafts have been stuffed full of talent. And guys have been, get fourth, fifth round, or like first round guys. There's no position in football that it's more piled up with draft picks than the wide receivers every year. Yeah. That being the way it is, I would draft a guy before I sign Mike Evans.
Nick asked, would I rather have a second-round pick or a proven player, Ted? If I'm okay with the T.J. Hockenson trade. I think he was worth a second-round pick. I don't think Mike Evans is worth a third-round pick. I like the Hockenson trade. Hockenson's a guy I would assume the Vikings are going to extend. He really improves the position. I was absolutely cool with that trade.
We're in position to get assets, not trade.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, so
just to chime in on that here quick, like Drew said, the wide receiver position is so deep in most of these drafts now. You can get guys, fourth, fifth round. We have a guy like Jalen Naylor on the roster already that could potentially get some run there. And at this point, your wide receiver too is T.J. Hockenson. He's the second option in the passing game now. That guy had more receptions and more receiving yardage from the tight end position this year than anybody not named Travis Kelce. So that's a pretty nice guy to have on your offense. And if you're going to have someone to complement Justin Jefferson, you have that guy already in Hockenson. You don't need to trade for a 30-something-year-old Mike Evans or whatever the case may be. You got enough, whether it's KJ Osborne or Naylor or Hockenson, you got enough at this time to potentially give yourself some options at the second or third wide receiver spot, because Jefferson's your clear number one guy. Hockenson is now pretty clearly your number two guy, and everyone's just kind of fighting for the rest of the targets after that. So there's no reason to spend premium capital on a guy that is A, getting a little long in the tooth, and B, might not be here for all that long anyway.
And C, if you're gonna extend Jefferson and Hockenson, which I hope the Vikings do, that's a whole lot of money in two players, and I don't think you can afford Evans for what they want to give.
I love listening to you guys, man. I learn a lot of football from you. You two cats got it together.
That's Naylor. I hardly know her.
That's great. Thank you, Chris Gates. That's really, really well said.
All right. With that, Ruby, are you ready to spin the wheel?
Yes. Let's see.
Hey, Toonses.
Hello.
Holy crap! A talking cat.
Toonses, how are you?
I'm good. Let's see
Yeah?
how. Yeah. Let's see how this is going to work.
Call me when you have no class.
Okay,
we
can
go.
you guys see that?
Yeah, we sure can.
All right. I had to pick a different wheel because I couldn't find the other one, but here we go.
All righty.
Does it have the sound?
We like the sound.
Can you hear it?
No.
No.
There's no sound. Lauren T.
Lauren T.
Congratulations, Lauren T. You are a prize winner for today. Get a hold of Ruby at Vikings Report, Drew and Ted at gmail.com. They'll send you a link to the prize vault, and you can pick out one of our many fine prizes available.
We still have a mug left. We have mugs left, Ted.
Okay. So that'll about do it for Chris and for Drew and for me. Chris, any last thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I think this is a pretty good discussion. I mean, obviously, we're going to keep an eye on the defensive coordinator situation and keep our fingers crossed that it is not Mike Pettin taking the job. I'm not sure who's going to be. I just don't really want it to be him. But, yeah, looking forward to the rest of the offseason and the upcoming draft shows with you folks. And, you know, whenever else you all want to do a live, just shout and I'll make it. So looking forward to more interaction with you guys over the course of the off season.
Same here. Drewster?
Shout.
Oh, stop it.
Bring Chris Gates no gout. He is the one that knows the Vikings the best. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for our show. We got a ton of stuff coming up in the off season. We will have intermittent live shows mixed in with Chris and Ted, and we're going to do all that for the draft. And we got a huge draft party. We're getting prizes in for the draft show already that takes place April 27th through the 29th. I look at the Vikings. We seem a little bit further along than last year. Last year, we were looking for a coach at this time. I mean, we got the coach and the GM set, so I'm excited to see how we roll in the combine and roll into free agency just to see how this offseason went. I mean, I think we still need to, in the future, break down what we thought last year's draft. We didn't get to that tonight, but I'm just glad to be here doing a show with you guys.
Me too. Yeah, we've got we got a studio show. We're back at studio next Saturday, 10 o'clock. We're moving to Saturdays. It's our off-season schedule now. Thanks for everybody who joined us on the show today. Lauren, again, congratulations. Go ahead and get a hold of Ruby at Vikings Report at Drew and Ted at gmail.com. Head on over to Purple Pain Forums. Check out that site. Sign up for an account. Start talking with the smartest Vikings fans in the world over there. We'll try to do better the next time, and we will see you next Saturday. For Chris, for Drew, for Truences, I'm Ted. We shot down the spy satellite. We'll see you.
Say good night, Ted. Say good night, Chris.
Good night, Ted. Good night, Chris.
Good night, Chris.